The contagious Delta variant is driving up COVID-19 hospitalization in Michigan. Experts are calling it a worrisome sign of what could be ahead this winter in the US. The US state, Detroit, is becoming a hotspot for the transmissions, with one hospital admitting nearly 400 COVID-19 patients. The Netherlands has recorded over 16,000 coronavirus infections in just 24 hours. This is the highest number since the start of pandemic. The rising number of cases is once again putting pressure on hospital and health experts. The government has been asked to impose a partial lockdown to fight COVID-19 surge. We are being told that the Dutch government is considering to impose Western Europe's first partial lockdown since the summer. The Czech Republic is reporting new coronavirus infections at levels close to record numbers. The country recorded 13,500 new cases on Thursday. Back in January, the record daily high was hovering at 17,000. Almost 6.2 million people in the nation of 10.7 million have been fully vaccinated, which is below the average among the European Union nations. In Israel, authorities are fighting a new variant. Civilian and military leaders holed up in a bunker for a day-long drill to stimulate the Omega variant outbreak. The drill gathered top leaders in an attempt to coordinate the workflow between various arms of government. For the fourth consecutive day, hundreds of Croatians gathered in the capital city to protest against the restrictions that the government has made on COVID vaccination certificate mandatory for public sector workers. Fans filed out of Dubai International Stadium after Australia clinched their maiden cricket T20 World Cup title on Sunday with an 8-wicket victory over New Zealand. Having restricted New Zealand to 172 runs for 4 wickets, Australia reached their target with 7 balls to spare after a brilliant batting display. Opening batter David Warner scored 53 of 38 balls, while Mitchell Marsh remained unbeaten on 77 runs from 50 deliveries to see Australia through and spark wild celebration among the teammates. New Zealand captain Kane Williamson earlier led by example with a whirlwind 85 runs of 48 balls to power his team to 172 runs for 4 wickets at Dubai International Stadium. Putting to bat, New Zealand struggled to get going and were 57 runs for 1 wicket at the halfway stage of their innings before Williamson accelerated the scoring. The right-hander dropped on 21 runs near the boundary by Josh Hazlewood. Williamson hit 3 sixes and 10 fours in his knock. The fast bowler Hazlewood was the most successful with the ball for Australia and picked up 3 wickets for 16 runs. Australian batter David Warner became the highest run scorer for Australia. David Warner was also the second highest run scorer of this year's T20 World Cup. Pakistan skipper Babar Azam is the leading run scorer with 303 runs. David Warner was named the player of the tournament. See what France has done recently. Its flag has started to look a little more blue now, a deeper shade. Paris has switched to using a deeper shade of navy blue from the previous brighter one. Honestly, one can hardly tell the difference. The flag looks more or less the same to the uninitiated, which is why it went unnoticed for a year. This change took effect officially about a year ago. The French president has been using this changed flag since July 2020, but people barely noticed it. Now they have, and they are asking questions like, what is the point of it? How does it change things? Does it imply a shift in policies or perhaps a change in ideology? These are some of the questions that people in France are asking. What does the government says in response? It says the decision was taken by President Emmanuel Macron himself. It was partly political, partly aesthetic. Political because Macron wanted to bring back the navy blue color, which happens to be a symbol of the French Revolution. How is it aesthetic? Because the French and the European Union flags fly next to each other at countless locations. The blue color looks almost identical. So apparently Macron wanted to draw a distinction. So he wanted to make the French flag stand out. Is this an indicator of a rift for the European Union? That is another question that is being asked. France has clarified that the change has nothing to do with that. It says the decision should not be taken as an anti-EU gesture. So is it a political move aimed at winning votes? France, heads to polls next year. Macron faces a tough challenge. He is up against a far-right contender, Marine Le Pen. So is the flag change some sort of a political maneuvering? Is Macron trying to turn the political tide by touching the deepest symbols of his country? Perhaps a quick question. When do countries change their flags? Mostly in case of a shift in political power, or in case of a change in ideology, or in case of a rehaul of the political structure. Facing uncertain future of their education under the Taliban regime, Afghan girls and activists have now called on the regime to reopen schools for the women of the country. Apart from this, the Afghan women are also blaming the Taliban of selective treatment in reopening schools, with scores saying that the regime in Afghanistan is only allowing girls in some provinces to go to school. According to Taliban officials, women students of secondary and high school have been allowed to attend schools in 7 out of 34 provinces. But schools for grades 7 to 12 is still banned in many provinces. Afghan's acting foreign minister Amir Khan Mutai has however said that 75% of girls in Afghanistan had resumed their studies in schools. Afghan girls are protesting on street saying do not politicize the education. They are requesting not to break their pens, not to burn their books, and not to close their schools. Remember, Taliban, after taking control of the country in mid-August, had closed the schools with thousands of girl students compelled to stay in their homes. Afghanistan's takeover by the Taliban have been harsh for women and the girls of the country. This is despite the regime's assurance of protecting women's rights. The idea of Great Green Wall was introduced in 2007, an effort to limit desertification and contain the Sahara Desert. But with the climate change in full swing and with its rising temperature and lack of rainfall, millions of trees that were a part of Green Wall died. Authorities now have to come up with alternatives. The idea of Great Green Wall was introduced by the African Union in 2007 to contain the Sahara Desert and help to create green and temperature agricultural pockets. The plan here was to plant a 5,000 million long boundary of trees, but with climate change, that goal has fallen by the wayside. Millions of trees died due to lack of rainfall and soaring temperatures. Organizers have now been forced to regroup and rethink their strategies. Their plan is now to focus on small cluster of trees instead of one long belt. Organizers say that any project has to start from the communities if you want it to be sustainable, and that is what we call community ownership. These are the two elements that guarantee the sustainability of projects. These small pockets have in fact proven to be beneficial in many cases. They have helped to enrich soil and also served economically for local farmers. One of the farmers who owns a citrus orchard grabbed the chance to plant one near a water source after a municipality meeting with village chief for discussing options for utilizing their land. He is not the only one. There are about 800 such success stories. This has even helped to cut down the cost of having to buy basic food supplies. One of the tribal women who says that here the water is the main source of occupation. On days when we have enough, we can water vegetable fields which will provide us with income, and as a result we will be able to support our husbands with the daily expenses. It has been over a decade since Great Green Wall project was introduced. Since then, only about 4% of the target has been met. As per estimates, 43 billion US dollars would be needed to reach the 2030 target, and so the organizers are shifting their attention to smaller, more sustainable ways and community-driven projects like this. It seems to be doing the trick, at least for now. At the recently concluded COP26 summit, African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina spoke about the importance of stopping desertification in Sahel, also announcing a commitment from the bank to mobilize $6.5 billion towards the Great Green Wall by 2025. Pfizer announced a deal with a UN-backed group to allow other drug companies to manufacture its COVID-19 antiviral pill. The move could make the treatment more globally accessible and affordable, particularly to low-income countries. According to Pfizer, the drug reduced COVID hospitalization and deaths by up to 90% among high-risk patients. Dr. Nahid Bedelia, infectious disease physician, says the following, that what's happening is Pfizer put this into something called medicines patent pool, which allows other companies to make generic versions of pills that are cheaper and that could provide medication up to 50% of the world. And the reason this is particularly helpful for resource limited settings, there are monopoly antibodies which are really hard to deliver in settings where you may not have access to clinics. You need to be able to infuse them rightly. You need to keep them in cold chain and all other elements. So having a pill like this which can reduce hospitalization and can reduce the burden of disease on many resource limited settings. However, it is not a replacement for vaccines. We have 5% of low-income countries' population currently vaccinated. You actually have to get sick and then be able to access this pill to have that benefits being seen. So this move will be copied by vaccine manufacturers as well, so that we can give prevention as well as treatment as a part of a global pandemic. The Portuguese Parliament has passed a new law, one that makes illegal for bosses to contact their employees after work hours. Well, if they do, employees can take legal actions, get their employers penalized with a hefty fine. Now, this rather interesting law is called the right to rest. It was passed by the Portuguese Parliament on Friday. Here is what it states. Companies with more than 10 employees can incur fines for contacting staff beyond shift hours. In case it is urgent, the employer will have to pay for the amenities utilized while their employees work from home, such as gas, internet, and electricity bill. And that's not all. This law further be enhanced to include more specific rules like banning employers from monitoring their works at home and ensuring that workers get to meet their boss every 2 months in order to stop them from feeling isolated or lonely. This law has been passed keeping in mind the growing number of people working from home due to the pandemic. Portuguese Minister of Labour and Social Security says the government plans to make remote working as easy as possible. Portuguese government plans to build a virtual workforce through this law to attract more digital nomads. What is this term, nomads? It basically refers to someone who performs his or her daily work entirely online. This word became so popular last year that it was added to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Portugal is trying to accelerate its economy by attracting digital nomads to the country. It wants them to come and work there and also get a chance to travel. Portugal is eyeing to boost the tourism sector without having to worry about work. The country has even set up a digital nomad village with free Wi-Fi and workstations. But coming back to the law, Portugal is not the first country to pass such a legislation. Several countries are trying to improve work-life balance of their citizens, ensuring that you are not forced to take your work home. France, Italy, Spain all have similar laws allowing workers to disconnect from office after work hours. Thousands of people took to the streets of Sri Lanka's capital to protest against worsening economic conditions, including shortages of fuels and essential goods. The protests in Colombo were led by the country's main opposition party, the United People's Force. The opposition has blamed the economic crisis on President Rajapaksa's government, and Sri Lankan parliament debated the national budget for 2022. Protesters says that Rajapaksa's policies have resulted in dwindling foreign reserves, high food prices, and shortages of essential goods like milk powder, cooking gas, and fuel. They also blamed the government decision to steer the country towards organic farming and burn chemical fertilizers imports, which has threatened to create a food crisis. Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says that people are unable to feed for themselves. Mothers and children are suffering from malnutrition. The industrial sector has completely collapsed. Unemployment is a rising issue. There are huge shortages of essential goods. According to World Bank, Sri Lanka's foreign reserves reduced to only 2 months worth of import in August, and the local rupee currency depreciated 7.4% against US dollars in the first 8 months of 2021. The Sri Lankan government tried to control price and even declared a state of emergency, but has so far failed to keep prices under control or even stop holding. The heavy storm has hit the Pacific Northwest heart, just south of the Canadian border. In a slight relief, though the waters have started receding in the Washington region, the authorities, however, have maintained the flood alert. Nearly 50% people living in the Washington state were left without power on Tuesday, as the first responders rushed to evacuate the people stuck due to flooding through Tuesday. The soggy condition triggered mudslides in the region, prompting the closure of a major highway near Bellingham. The highway is a major thoroughfare stretching along the west coast from Mexico to Canada. Drone footages from the town in Washington shows the area submerged and destroyed due to the historic flooding. People in Washington says that last night it just saw the water come across, and before they knew it is flooding, within a matter of minutes it was all around the town. It was so fast. You always hear how fast the flood water is. You don't realize it till you see it. It was really fast, said one of the citizens. As a part of evacuation, the US Coast Guard airlifted 10 people from the rising flood waters near Fox in Washington. Video footage shows the rescuers in bright orange jumpsuits attaching wing lines to evacuees on the roof of buildings during rescue operation. 3 children and 1 baby were among those lifted to safety by the crew.